Well, welcome everybody. I want to say thank you to everybody for just coming to our training, Restorative Conflict Intervention, addressing conflict with dignity and respect. We have mine and Robert's email here, and you're welcome to contact us afterwards. We will send you this PowerPoint after the training. We'll also send you the chat file. So we'll be saving the chat file, and we'll send that to you. And so, you'll also have access to the recording, which will be on our webpage at some point. We have to kind of do a lot of work with it because it has to be edited, and also we have to add closed captioning, but you'll have access to that as well. All right, so let's see. And I did want to say one thing. I just want to, kind of give gratitude to the County Office of Education for allowing us the ability to do this, right? Because we've gone to several schools live, face to face, all over the county. But this has been kind of the preferred method recently, obviously because of COVID, but we just appreciate the County Office of Ed for just providing us this ability to do this free of charge for our schools. We know it really is a big help to everybody. So then one thing we want to accomplish today is increase understanding of proactive and responsive restorative practices. And we'll kind of let you know what that means and how they complement each other. Increase understanding how conflicts can be opportunities to learn, teach, and strengthen positive relationships, and increase understanding and skills on how to intervene restoratively during conflicts. And this is hard work. So just know that I certainly am still growing in this ability to do this. It's not easy. It takes practice. I have failed at times. I have been effective at times. So it's something I'm growing in with you. And so we definitely feel that to do this type of work, when you're intervening during conflicts, you definitely need to go in mindful and intentional and understand that you're really, really teaching a lot during those times of conflict. And so one of the things that we like to do is, we'll use a little video, just kind of asking you to just calm yourself for a minute. We'll just take about 1 minute. We'll play the video. And I just ask you to kind of, even though I know, it's hard sometimes and you're in different rooms and things, it can be difficult, but just take some breaths, Maybe look at the visuals that you'll be seeing and listen to the music and just kind of try your best to just breathe in, kind of maybe breathe in something that you might need today. You're imagining yourself breathing in whatever it is, healing or peace or strength or focus, and breathing out anything that you don't want to carry. Might be a sense of anxiety or stress or resentment or anything like that. Just release it out. So I'm going to stop this sharing and I'm going to go to the actual video. And it's just a YouTube video. And if you would also take a moment just to reflect on the fact that we are in an interdependent relationship with nature, with the trees, with the water, with the air, with the earth. pause it there. So really, what we're saying is it's really a good idea for every educator to take time every day to do some form of mindfulness. And it's something, I'm very, very committed to. It's something I've now gotten into a pretty good rhythm of doing that on a daily basis. And I've had to wake up earlier to get that done because, I'm kind of a busy person, but I try to get that done every day so that when I go into my busy schedule, I'm also going in mindful, right? About, hey, I'm here to serve the community. I'm here to spread goodness and light and love and all those great things that many of you do every day. I just try to be mindful of it, right? And I try to, I say my little prayer, right? That, I just hope that that it can come through me to everybody I meet. And so I feel like that's my purpose on earth, right? So I try to just remind myself, like, hey, do your best, and so I try to stay, I guess, intentional about doing that. I really think that all of us should think about ways to do that. And when Robert and I were in a training yesterday, some of the people were, saying, oh, they do this, they take a walk and they walk their dog, they like to go swimming, they, to have their morning coffee and they just do a little mindfulness thing. That's all good. Everybody has to develop their own thing that works. But for us to be effective, especially during conflicts, it's really, really important for us to empower ourselves that way. So, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our thing here, and I'm going to just go over this with you. And so, Laura, would you be willing to read over these community agreement offerings?
Sure. Confidentiality. Create a safe space for all. Acceptance of where people are today. Listen to each other. Brave and non-judgmental space with grace. Open-mindedness to others' ideas. Assume good intentions. Trauma-informed approach. Open communication. Speak from the heart.
That's great. Thank you, Laura. So one of the things this is what actually we came up with. The people here that were part of our introduction session to restorative practices and circles, we came up with this together. And so we just now want to review it to say, hey, is everybody still good with this? And we know that some people weren't there at that time. So you're kind of new with us right now. But we want to ask you as well, are you good with this, with us trying to follow these community agreements as Laura read for us? All right, so it looks like everybody's good. So we're going to do our best. And by the way, I want to tell you, you can call me on anything of these agreements that I'm not following, because I may get unfocused. I may do something to make somebody feel unsafe. It may feel like I'm not accepting you where you are today or something like that. I'm not listening to you. Please send me a message, or either in the chat or just unmute yourself and say, hey, I thought you asked me to call you on it. I'm calling you on it. That's okay. Just do it with kindness, right? Because I think that gives the opportunity for any of us who are trying to do this, like with students or with staff, we're teaching in that moment. We're saying, I'm really about this. I gave my thumbs up too. I gave that nonverbal sign. Yes, I agree. It's like a nonverbal contract. And so, I want to follow it, and I also want to improve. So that's how young people can begin to learn, like, wow, these people are really humble. They are actually asking for our voice to be valued? Yes, we are. That's what this whole restorative movement is about. It's about empowering the voice of young people and actually the voice of every human being in our that's connected with our school community. So it's a big ask, and we have to keep every opportunity that we have. We want to be able to offer. So one of the things that we want to do is ask as a roll call for everybody in the chat to go ahead and type your name, your school or organization, and also how are you feeling today, choosing the number between 1 through 10, where 1 means you feel awful and 10 means you feel awesome. And we want you to know this: if you have a lower number that represents how you're feeling, please tell us that. We're not here just to celebrate with the 10s, which we will, but we're also here to be in empathy and compassion with those people who are maybe having a difficult day. And thank you, everybody, for doing that. So it gives me a chance, and not only me, it gives you as a participant a chance to scroll and look and see who's here, right? And also see who's, which number are you? You can just do a quick thing. And this is a way for you to also, especially if you're doing distance learning, or if you're not doing distance learning, and you don't have the time to, do what we call a full check-in with a circle when you have 35 people like we do today. You can do it in different ways. So one way that people have done it is teachers are more and more adopting the research-based practice of greeting their students as they're coming in the door. As you all know, that's a research-based restorative practice. And so, it's basically saying, good morning to everybody or good afternoon as they're coming in. But some teachers have then combined a check-in with that. They've said, as students are coming in, I've asked them to do a thing where they're saying maybe a 1 through 5 check-in, right? With the same concept. 1 meaning you feel awful, 5 is you feel amazing. And then so when students are coming in, they're just kind of coming in like this, as they're walking by you, but you are also checking in with them, and you're saying, I'm a 4 today or whatever. And so it's your way of doing a quick check-in. And let's say a student walks in and they do this to you, right? And let's say you're feeling like a 4 or a 5 or whatever you are, and you do that back to them. Obviously what you want to do is you want to say something to that student and say, hey, I just want you to know I'm here for you in any way that I can support you, right? You want to say something, because I know it's kind of difficult. Everyone's coming in, but you want to kind of say that. And then you might want to follow up at some point and be able to say, hey, I'm just checking in with you. How are you feeling? Is there anything I can do to help you feel more comfortable today? And, I'm just doing this because I care about you. Because every chance that we get, we want to keep communicating that we care about you. You're important to us, right? And we embrace you just as you are. If you're feeling like a 1, we embrace you right there. So just kind of think about all of that. Just ways to be able to do it. And then I just wanted to do a quick review of these basics, right? What we're trying to talk about when we talk about, like, we're moving kind of away from that Western kind of mentality of we're just individuals, and we kind of become somewhat me-centered and self-centered and sometimes selfish and separate and not caring about each other. And we're moving to the restorative, meaning we're trying to restore the ancient wisdom that says we are a community, and we need to recognize that we are actually a part of each other, and that we depend on each other for our very survival and definitely for our ability to thrive. As you see the penguins, they do that through the huddle, and they depend on each other in a very harsh environment that they live in. Well, that's temperature and weather harsh. We live in a harsh environment too, socially, where there's a lot of people that bully and treat you badly, and it can be a very harsh place to live in. And so we say we need to come together as community. And just the same thing with the trees. We want just that reminder that these, beautiful redwoods, they reach out to each other in their root system, and they intertwine their roots, right? And it's a way of strengthening them in their foundation, in their roots. And so they can actually weather the storm when the strong winds come. And they do come at different times. But because they're like that, they're actually stronger together, as you would imagine. So that's what we're trying to move towards when we talk about just moving towards this, what we call restorative justice practices. And sometimes people will say, well, why do we say justice? What's restorative justice practices? Well, one of the thoughts around that is that we need to develop environments that really promote social justice, where people, their human dignity is raised up and prioritized in our school system. Their sense of hope, their sense of belonging, their sense of importance is restored, and that those people have a right for that. They have a right to it, to feel valued. They have a right to feel important and belonging. And so that's a human right. It's a human rights issue, a social justice issue. And so by us doing the simple things that we're talking about, greeting kids at the door, checking in with them, these are very important, basic kinds of things that say the same thing. We care about you. You're important. You belong here, right? We accept you where you are. And for now, Robert, I'm just going to ask you, if you don't mind, just to read this one for us.
Building a foundation of trust and respect. The foundational work of building trust and respect with students and staff is essential if we are going to be effective while intervening during conflict.
And thank you, Robert. And Robert, for you, what does that mean to you?
You just read that, I kind of just saw a conflict in my head. And I'm just thinking, if someone's going to intervene, I'm hoping that person is respected, because that would, I think that would help the situation rather than make things potentially more complicated.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let me just ask, Vanessa, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Hi, Vanessa. Welcome. And I just wanted to ask you, what does this mean to you, this statement here?
That it's important to build establish a good relationship with our students and our staff in order for it to work.
Absolutely, right? Because Vanessa, I would, just ask you, like, if somebody was to try to intervene during a conflict with you, but you didn't have trust with them. I mean, would you really listen? Would you go along with them?
No, it would be hard to open up and trust them.
Right. And the same thing, Vanessa, would go for even, let's say one of your family members, if they haven't been actually listening to you and honoring you and valuing you, on a daily basis, and then some kind of conflict arises, and now they want to kind of come to you to try to, I guess, to try to mend that, or some, I don't know, just to try to intervene in some ways. I think the same thing could exist where you wouldn't even trust them, right?
Yes.
So that's why we're saying the foundational work of building trust and respect, that part of the restorative practices should be done really 80% of the time. And then the 20% is really, intervening when there's a problem. Does that make sense? All right, cool.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so That's important, because sometimes what I've noticed is people want to go directly into the intervention, like, conflict intervention, restorative conferencing first, and they want to focus on that. I understand why, because in school sometimes we feel like we're little, like, social firefighters. We're putting out fires all the time, and yet, if we're too busy putting out fires all the time, we're never going to change the actual environment. Changing the environment will come by the foundational daily practices that are some of the things that we talked about in introduction and in circles. So here we go. We want to just ask you about this, right? So what did we learn growing up? Because what we learned growing up actually informed the way we deal with conflict now. And I want to give you a couple of examples. I want you to be thinking about that. While you were growing up, what style of communication did people in authority, whether they be parents or teachers or whoever, what did those people in authority, like, what style did they use with you or with others you cared about during conflicts? And what did you learn from it? And I'll just give you a quick example, right? So I grew up, kind of a long time ago, but my parents come from a big Latino family, and 8 kids, and my dad was kind of like the breadwinner. He'd go out and work, and my mom stayed at home, and it was kind of traditional in that way. But I also noticed that he definitely had the power, and I noticed that if my mom wanted to have a kind of a different opinion than him, he kind of, just almost like he would shut her down in some ways, whether it just be a look or a gesture or a word. And I noticed very quickly, I hardly ever saw them fight. I hardly ever saw them have conflict. But that was because in some ways they were in an oppressive relationship, where my mom, honestly, was, like, in some ways demeaned and devalued, because she was just following along with the traditional thing where he's in charge and he has the right to tell me what to do. Now, things have changed quite a bit now, right? But that's the way a lot of families grew up. I grew up in that. But also in the neighborhood I grew up in, which is kind of a rough neighborhood, it was a whole different environment. It wasn't like in my family. And so, I grew up to be a nice kid and blah, blah, blah. But, if people threatened or pushed me or made me feel demeaned or devalued in our neighborhood, the norm was I had to make them feel worse than they made me feel. So if they made fun of me, I was going to make fun of them and try to cut them down. And if somebody hit me, I was going to hit them harder. And it wasn't turn the other cheek. It wasn't let me have a circle with you. It was, I'm going to make you hurt. And that's just how I grew up. And so I have those two experiences. In some ways, I learned to be uncomfortable in conflict in my family. But I also learned this other part of me that was kind of like I had to become a lion sometimes when I felt threatened. And so I had this nice part of me, and I also had this mean part of me. So what we're going to do now is we're going to ask you to go into your triad shares. And then for those of you who are from the Learning Choice Academy, we're going to ask you to just be in your room. And since you're physically together, we want you to stand up and go with just 3 people, right? So try 3, 4 at the max and answer this question, right? That you see on the screen. When you were growing up, what style of communication did people in authority use? And then Robert is going to send the rest of us that aren't a part of those groups into our own triad breakout groups. And then you'll have maybe about 2 minutes each to share, and then we'll come back. So Robert, will you guide us, please? Thank you, everybody, for just engaging in that. It's kind of interesting just to think about, and I can see everybody over there at the Learning Choice Academy. Thank you for now re-engaging, coming back to your computers, and appreciate that. So one of the things that we'd like to do is, to even ask a few of you, sort of like, what did you learn from what you were seeing around you and how people were treating each other, and like how, especially during conflicts. So, Brittany, would you be willing to kind of just talk about that, about like, what was that like as you were growing up? How were these people in authority, parents and other people around, how they were responding to conflict? What did it teach you?
Well, for me and my group, I shared that, I grew up in a single parent household. So dad wasn't really a part of the picture, but mom was there for everything. And my mom took more of an authoritarian kind of role with me. It wasn't, and like I, told my group, it wasn't anything to its extreme, but she definitely, let me know that she was the authority in the household, and there were rules and expectations that were put into place for me to kind of like follow and, uphold to. And as far as like interpersonal relationships and things go, I feel like with my upbringing, it definitely plays a part in my communication styles. I'm more of a like direct person, and I definitely came up under the idea of a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And that's something that, my mom kind of like taught me within her like parenting style. So I feel like that's kind of guided me as an adult, or molded me as an adult.
All right. Well, good. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense of why you would be that kind of, kind of direct person, and, closed mouth doesn't get fed, and you got to just, tell people what's up. And so you can see how how we were raised actually informs how we are now within conflicts. And then, so, Bianca, can you hear me? And I know Bianca told us that Abraham had.
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. I know Abraham had to meet with the students, so I just wanted to ask you, what about yourself? What did you learn from kind of people as you were growing up in regards to conflict and how people were treated?
Just like Brittany, I also grew up in a pretty authoritarian parent kind of environment. I grew up with both my parents, but my mom was always like the head of the household, and it was always like a don't talk back kind of thing. So I think even now it has affected me in kind of making it uncomfortable to express myself, being in that position of confrontation and just vulnerability, I guess. So I actually never thought about that. So now seeing this now, it just does makes it seem that like that's the reason why I grew up not knowing how to express myself.
That's fantastic. I mean, I don't mean it's fantastic that you're, have to go through that difficult. It's fantastic that you reflected on it today and that you are making the connection. That's really what we're hoping, is that people would make the connection about how we were raised actually informs a part of us, right? Obviously.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Bianca. And Tamara, what about you? What was your thought about that?
Well, my life was very similar, I thought, to yours. My upbringing, Irish Catholic, big family, always loud. So I'm a very loud person, which I don't even want to be loud. It drives me crazy. And we all talk over each other. So we were born interrupters, and whoever talks loudest gets heard. And yeah, and conflict was just yelling. I mean, we didn't, and hurtful words. And yeah, whoever could hurt them, sibling or a cousin worse, and I always had my cousins around, and it was beautiful, but there was a lot of conflict.
Wow. Well, thank you, Tamara. I mean, I hope that people are listening, because what you're hearing is that people are growing up in different kinds of environments and different kinds of cultures. And we're not saying one culture is right or one culture is wrong or nothing like that. We're just saying where you grow up impacts you. And I think it's a good idea just to reflect on it and to go, okay, maybe I should work on that, maybe, because I know for myself, I definitely had to work on it. I had to say, hey, wait a minute, with the way my mom was with my dad, I kind of found myself sometimes falling into that, where I also was kind of more uncomfortable with conflict, right? And uncomfortable kind of speaking out in certain venues. But then in others, then I would really speak out. So it was just a weird kind of reality. So I've had to learn, who do I want to be? And I've been able to learn from a lot of different people. So it's not my parents only that taught me. My brothers, my sisters, my aunts, my uncles, like Tamara was saying, I had a lot of cousins. But now in my adult life, I've had many mentors and bosses and colleagues. And so I've been able to really look at that and say, how do I want to be? Not just how am I? Because that's what everyone's taught me, but I actually have a choice in this thing. That's what today is about. Can I be a restorative conflict intervener, right? And we all know, if we really admit it and be honest, this is hard work, right? Our buttons are pushed, right, when we are in conflict. And we all, many of us have gone through different situations where we feel disrespected, we feel demeaned and devalued, we feel accused when we didn't do something, and it hurts. So
It doesn't. I wanted to add one more thing.
Sure, please go ahead, Tamara.
It doesn't only hurt, I think it causes anxiety and trauma that makes it difficult, because your body goes back into past conflict, right? And then you address it in a way that maybe that conflict didn't even deserve. And so, there's just so much behind it all.
You're right on. Yeah, I thank you for that reminder. So you understand what she's saying, right? That our past traumas come up when the buttons are pushed, the vulnerable buttons, when people either we feel attacked or whatever it is. It could be an argument or whatever it be, or it could be a comment somebody made in a meeting. And all of a sudden, what happens? But boom, you find yourself your body, you can begin to sense things going on in your body. She said the anxiety starts to rise, and maybe you feel flush in your face. I don't know. It depends. Everyone's body's different, right? Some people tell me, "Oh, Anthony, my hands get sweaty, and my face turns red, and sometimes I can't think straight." Right?
All those things.
Yes,
Yes.
all of them. And just so also this goes back to our ancient, parts of ourselves, right? As we were developing, our brains were developing in part of our own evolution, when we get emotionally attacked, it feels almost the same as when our ancestors were attacked by a ferocious animal. It's the same kind of reaction where we go into that fight, right? Flight, run, or freeze. We're the same people. We carry our ancestors with us. So just know we just want to get to know ourselves better, so that we recognize when we start to get anxious because of feeling attacked, or we start to feel I can't think that well. You begin to recognize the signs and then do what's appropriate for yourself, so you can be the professional that you want to be, right? And this takes practice, hard work, and everything we're talking about today is all about that. It's all about, okay, how can we grow as human beings to become better, right? So that we're not hurting people in the process of these things, right? We're actually helping them heal, right? That's part of when we say restorative practices, that word restore, we're talking about becoming healers, social healers, where people can begin to go, wow, when I'm with her or when I'm with him, I feel like I can be myself and they accept me for who I am. And I'm able to grow. I feel like somebody finally gets me, right? Somebody accepts me. And I feel maybe for the first time, I'm able to work through things and be authentic. That's us. That's what we're called to be, but that's hard. So just know I'm going to keep saying that. This is difficult work. So thank you all for doing
Can
that.
I share a book title really quick?
Please do.
I don't know if it's backwards there. It's The Body Keeps the Score, and it's Brain, Mind, and Body and the Healing of Trauma. And it's really awesome so far.
Really good book. I read that. That's
I
a
love it.
really good book. How
Yeah.
everything in your body keeps record for life, and that's how you build PTSD. I read it for a training in PTSD.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome
Thank
book.
you. Thank you both for sharing that resource. And Tamara, if you don't mind, just kind of type that into actually, Robert just did, just in case anybody wants to see it, you can, he puts it right there, Body Keeps Score. It's under
Keeps
Healing
the
Trauma.
Score, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Also the author.
okay, thank you. So that's good. See how this works? It's like the community begins to share resources with each other. And you're getting a lot of good people responding. It's on Audible and all of that. All right, so I'm going to go back to this. This is based off of the social discipline window, but it's all about relationships. And for some of you, you might kind of be like, oh, wow, this is weird, right? But if you remember the social discipline window, the way it's set up is the higher you go up on the graphic, the higher the expectation, the higher the standard, right? And then the further you go to the right on the graphic, the more support and the more nurturing, the support, all that you give. So obviously, we're trying to get to the width, right? We're trying to give high expectations, high standards, while we provide the support for them to reach the high standards. So we're not just saying, hey, here's your standard, and you better reach it, or here's your bad grade, or here's your punishment, or you know what I mean? That's not what we're about. That's not the restorative way. The restorative way is this: I find out where you are, and I embrace you right there. And then I provide you the supports so you can actually grow and get better. And so your growth is the success. That's why we call it growth mindset. We truly believe that we celebrate people's growth, right? As they are able to maybe have a conflict and not go off on somebody and attack them. That's a growth for a lot of people. Or have a conflict and not run away and never deal with it. When they begin to deal with it in a more humane way, in a respectful way, that's a growth. So if you notice in the width, it says people are, as human beings to be honored. And so what we say with the restorative work is we're saying we want to try through every interaction to honor all the people that we come in contact with. That's hard to do. And we say this, look at, if you notice right below that, what does it say? Unconditional acceptance. That means, wow, you have to accept people where they are, not where you are, where they are. And that means you may need to ask them questions and listen to them to find out where they are. And then when they're accepted there, that's the first step towards their healing. And now what kinds of supports are you going to be giving them? The first thing is this: unconditional acceptance. And then supporting them and further, right, with academically and socially, emotionally. So if you notice though, like where it says the two, people are objects to be managed, and it's a very conditional acceptance. And then it's power over somebody. And then, so if you look over at the 4 box, it's people as objects of need. And it's also a conditional acceptance. And it's power over somebody. And it sounds kind of strange because most of the time people look at that 4 quadrant and they think, oh yeah, that's kind of what the restorative is you're being nice to people and you're being friendly all the time and all that. And it is a part of being restorative. But if you're doing things for people just to try to get your own needs met, you're not truly being restorative. The restorative person is assessing, where is this person? What are their needs? And how can I help them to get their needs met? It's a very selfless type of attitude. And that's hard because we're kind of naturally, we can easily tend towards selfishness, right? This is selflessness. It's about servant leadership, right? It's about serving other people's needs. And this is all very hard work. So what I want to do now is I want to just see if I could ask a couple of you your thoughts on this. So Audrey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And what are your thoughts on this, Audrey? Just kind of, thinking about this, kind of the way, this is situated where you have the WIF and it's unconditional acceptance and people are human beings to be honored and some of the other things that you see here.
Yeah, it's definitely something where you have to be mindful of being selfless, not be in a defensive mode where you take things like wrong. Let's say someone's actions really bother you, but you don't really know what's happening with them. So I think it's very important to keep yourself mindful of what other people are going through.
Absolutely, Audrey. And one of the things that we know in the 4 agreements, right, is don't take things personally, right? So Audrey, I'm going to ask you, what do you do to try to keep yourself kind of like in a good space, even though somebody else is not in a good space and you're trying to intervene and help them?
I definitely try to reflect on whether it's my ego who's getting defensive or if it's like truly necessary to get annoyed over what's happening. I think it's important to be empathetic and, not let people steal the peace that you have within, like if they're being very aggressive or whatever. I think it's important to put your calm side ahead of that and not let your ego just react over something that's not truly there.
Wow, that is so much wisdom in what you just said, right? To not, she says, I try to stay mindful and alert of this whole thing of my ego. And is this something, like she actually monitors herself and her reactions and what, because the ego is really wanting to be sort of like react and maybe hurt them like they're hurting us and stuff like this. And Audrey, I think, what you just said was power packed, full of wisdom. And so thank you. And I do want to ask Rosa, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Oh, thank you, Rosa. So what are your thoughts on some of this, including, some of what we just heard?
I do agree saying that we have to be empathetic and we have to always listen carefully between the lines. And I was saying to one of my colleagues in the break room that sometimes we're overwhelmed and we don't listen. And this is one of the problems. And not wanting people to be like we want them to be, but accepting them, having tolerance.
It's really just so well said. Thank you so much for, that great comment as well. Yeah, I heard you say that what's lacking is that we need to listen better and we need to listen to gain understanding, to gain empathy. I think you said listen empathetically. And you said
certain skills as human.
And by the way, you even said something also. You said we need to listen between the lines.
Right.
And really,
because sometimes what they say isn't meant in that way.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I really appreciate your wisdom and for sharing it with us, because, she's right. Like in when you think of it, part of our job as a helper, as a service provider, as an educator, is to learn ways to kind of be that trauma sensitive, right, practitioner, so that we hear somebody or we see their behavior, we hear their words, but we're trying to also interpret, like, where's that coming from, right? What's happening? What might be behind that?
Right.
Right? Reading between the
Right.
lines, as you were saying. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. We have to take time to analyze not only the other people, but even ourselves.
Wow. That is, so I hope that people are beginning to understand the way this training works. This is a community of trainers, right? All of us. We're all in this together. We're also, like me, even though I come as a trainer, I also come as a learner. And so that's what we're hoping, that we are going to move into our next section right after this break. And we're going to ask you to kind of function like that, really have conversations, listen to people, take some notes, but also add in. You can add things into the chat. You can, if you I know some of you, it's you're in a situation where it may be harder for you to share verbally. We still want that wisdom from you, if you will. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. What I just wanted to remind you, we have this compass of shame, and just reminding us that some of the things that Tamara was talking about, right, our traumas and things in the past, they impact us when somebody says something, somebody does something that makes us feel that we're threatened in some ways. Now, it may not be their intention, just so you know, it may not be their intention, but how we interpret it, we end up having these kinds of reactions. We withdraw, we avoid, we attack others, we attack self. And we went over this in the introduction section, but I wanted just to kind of remind you, just to kind of keep it in your mind, that this is part of this, right? Because we're going to be seen, as we're kind of doing restorative conflict intervention, we're going to be seeing this. And we ourselves are going to be feeling some of the desires of maybe going on the attack, or maybe, possibly withdrawing. And Tamara, would you like to say anything?
These all seem kind of unhealthy ways. Is the center supposed to be a healthy?
Yes. Now, that's a good point, Tamara, that these are all unhealthy ways. And really, the reason why they're unhealthy is because they're reactions to shame, right? So what we're trying to do is what Tamara is, I think, saying right now. We're trying to learn new ways that are healthy, right? So what they're saying is, like when we don't practice and learn and practice new ways and healthy ways, this is what we fall into. And many people that we deal with, we see this. And I know many of us who have served kids, we've seen this many times. And I know many of you, if you would admit it, you probably have done this many times, because I have too. But I've learned, as Tamara is saying, I've learned new ways and more healthy ways, because if we don't, our relationships will always end up in harm. So we have to find ways to grow and learn through that. So thank you for that reminder. And then when we look at this kind of during conflict, teaching and learning are magnified. I'm going to ask Laura, can you hear me?
Here I am.
All right, great. Thank you, Laura. Would you mind just reading this for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
During conflict, we have the opportunity to solidify the harmful lessons that many people have learned during past conflicts, or we can help to restore people's sense of safety and human dignity by the way we treat them through conflicts.
So, Laura, thank you for reading that. And I know it's kind of asking a lot, but what does that mean to you?
So, yeah, like with self, notice that, okay, this is how conflict shows up in me. These are all the things I have to do to work through it, as we just discussed. But then seeing it in others, notice that it's an opportunity to draw in and welcome in and restore and, make individuals feel safe and as though they belong by treating them with dignity and respect.
Absolutely. That's the idea that we're trying to grow into it. And it's sort of the thought on this is that, a lot of people just do the same thing over and over and over again, where they're just reacting to people and they're using power over people to kind of assert their own feelings of being in control and all this stuff. So, and a lot of times what that does is it makes people feel devalued, demeaned, and hurt. And it's like over and over. It's like a cycle for people. It just keeps happening. And people kind of lose a sense of hope or sense of safety around other people because they feel like so often their own human dignity was kind of felt like it was taken from them. And so we have the ability to restore people's sense of safety and human dignity right through us, through those interactions during the conflict. And that's why I say teaching and learning are magnified, meaning if you're a teacher or you're an educator, you have to remember that during the conflicts, everybody is listening to you. It's like everyone's on high alert. Like it's almost like you have them in the palm of your hands in some ways, because they're all wondering, how's Miss So-and-so going to respond or react to this? How's Mr. So-and-so going to because they're used to people, the hammer coming down. They're used to this kind of oppressive leadership. And so everybody's eyes and ears and their whole senses are just on alert. And they're learning very, very quickly in those moments, right? And so what we say is, since we understand this, teaching and learning are magnified in those moments of conflict. We need to be very, very conscious, mindful, intentional about how we are responding. And listen, as I say this, I'm certainly not perfect at it, okay? So I know this is a struggle. So I'm not trying to sit here like pontificating. I'm also speaking to myself. I'm trying to grow in this, and it's hard work. So just please know that. And then, so what we want to do is we want to move from oppression to that restorative model, right? And but again, that's a lot of us don't understand that we have been, in some ways, we've been in a colonialist society for a long, long time, for all our whole lives, all of us, every single one of us. And so that whole colonialist attitude is one of instilling fear, oppression, using power over people, right? It's not about like, oh, we're just going to lift people up no matter your differences, and we're going to love you and embrace you and accept you. That's not what it's about. That colonialist attitude has been very destructive, but it's a part of our history here. And so I believe this, everybody here in this training wants to improve our communication, to be more restorative during conflicts. I think that's partly why you're here. And then, but I know this, many of you already use a lot of strategies that you use during conflicts, whether it's with your own children, your spouse, your students, your colleagues, the people who report to you, whatever, that you use those strategies during conflicts to communicate more restoratively already. So what we want you to answer these two questions. What inspires you to improve your communication to be more restorative during conflicts, which is very hard work. What inspires you that way to do that? And then what strategies do you already use during conflicts that communicate more restoratively? Like for me, for example, partly my faith has always kind of inspired me to try to be a better person, to not treat people disrespecting them or anything like that. I don't want to harm other people. I want to try to build them up. So my faith kind of encourages me to be like, okay, I want to improve on this because I know it's wrong to harm people. So a lot of times the strategies that I use is to try to listen. And I think it was, I don't know if it was Audrey or Rosa that said, try to listen and sort of read between the lines and try to be empathetic and understanding, and then see what I can do to be a healing presence for people. I don't do it all the time. Okay. I'm saying this is what I try. And so what I want you all to do is go into the triads. And if you're in the Learning Choice Academy, larger rooms where you're with each other, again, stand up, go into a triad, and just answer these two questions, please. And so, all right, we want to now get into this and just find out maybe from, a few of you, either what inspired you, but definitely what strategies do you use during conflicts to communicate more restoratively. And so this time, what we'd like you to do is maybe just for that second part of it, like what strategies do you use during conflicts to communicate more restoratively? If you would in the chat, just put one thing, one strategy that you use to do that, right? And so that will be helpful to us. And if any of you feel like you want to add in verbally, that's fine too. But we'd love to see it in the chat so we can document it and people can see it, get some ideas like, oh yeah, that might work for me. So let's see, speaker, listener, active listening. Here comes all the listening. Focus on how both sides feel. Empathy. Instead of taking an accusatory approach, communicate how you are feeling and responding. Beautiful. So here you go. Now you begin to see that the wisdom coming from our group here, asking if the other person is looking for solutions or just needs to talk. Wow, that's pretty cool. Active listening. Look how much active listening is in there. That's usually the key anyway in all of the restorative practicing. So I just sit down with them and start with what's going on? Good. Using I statements and being patient. Talk about how I feel and not be accusatory to the other person. Thank you. Being mindful that I'm not already thinking about my response before someone else finishes sharing. Ooh, that's a good one, huh? So that we're not listening to just respond, but we're actually listening to gain understanding. Using I statements, apologizing even if I don't feel like I was wrong, trying to see the conflict from the other person's perspective. Wow. So it obviously then Eva comes with that humility and really, makes that assumption that I may need to apologize even as we begin. Gain the other person's perspective. So you can see how much people use I statements, listening, being present, taking time to cool down in order to better express one's feelings. And Miles, just so you know, Candida just joined us recently. And so she was actually saying almost the exact thing that you were saying right there. She wants to gather her thoughts, right? So that she's not just reacting. Placing an intentional effort to acknowledge the human in every person. Wow, that's cool. Staying in touch with my body and breathing when necessary. God, that's cool, Laura. Thank you. Listen, mindful of their situations. Yeah, see how much listening is playing into this? Shifting perspectives to theirs. Wow. So Ilse, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more about shifting perspectives to theirs?
Yes. So something that I try and actively practice when there's any type of conflict that comes up is just, it's a practice where the other person puts themselves in my perspective, and I put myself in theirs. So kind of just shifting stories and speaking from that place to each other, because I think most of the reason why their conflict occurs most of the time is because miscommunication or misunderstanding. So I might think that they're experiencing it one way, but they're actually experiencing it another way. So
And
just,
Ilse,
yes.
I really like this idea. I just want to ask you a clarifying question. So
Right.
how do you do that with the other person? Like you and the other person shifting perspectives to kind of embrace the other person's perspective. How do you actually do it?
So the moments that I have practiced it with both students and I'm just in my personal life, just taking a second, communicating like, all right, let's take a second and then you tell the conflict or like basically storytelling from my point of view, right? Like why do you think I'm upset? So really putting yourself in the other person's shoes and speaking from that place. So it goes more of like storytelling for me with students when they, let's say like, and they talk from I, like acting like they're me. So I'm upset because I was running or you were running to class when you weren't supposed to, right? It's like, okay. And then, so I go from their perspective. I was upset because you screamed at me when I was just trying to get to class or, that's just a random example, but really putting ourselves in each other's perspectives and then talking about them and correcting them if there's any issues or, miscommunication there.
Wow. That is one great strategy. If you really truly want people to kind of gain understanding of the other person's, like walk in the other person's shoes, get their perspective. I think Ilse's, I think she should write a book on that anyway, but yeah. So what a cool thing, right? Like to get a teacher to go, how might that student feel when they were yelled at, right? But also the student to kind of go like, how might it felt like to be that teacher or educator that had to kind of stop them because they were running in the hall or whatever it was. It's like really, God, such a great strategy. Thank you for, just for doing that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, we're going to save this chat, obviously, and we're going to share it with you afterwards in a document. And so that way you can kind of relook at some of these and maybe get inspired a little bit. And the idea behind the restorative circle, even when it's like this, when we're not maybe in a physical circle, but we're in a virtual circle in some ways, right? Because it's really about our attitude, about engaging the way you're engaging in conversations and listening and learning. That's what makes the circle. And you can really get a lot out of it if you just put yourself into it the way you're doing. So we really appreciate everybody and what you're doing. All right, so let me now go over here. And now, Candida, would you be willing, since you're kind of newly with us here, would you be willing to read this slide for us if you're available?
No problem. Restorative language and response to negative behavior. 1, don't take the negative behavior personally. 2, the behavior is teaching us. 3, speak calmly and authentically and listen. 4, create space for de-escalation. 5, be strategic with your language. 6, reintegrate into the community.
Thank you, Ilse. Candida. And if you would you just kind of read over those again just by yourself and just sort of like, which one would you say is kind of more close to your own practice and what you try to do? What's the thing that you kind of lean on mostly on this list of 6?
I think definitely number 3, speak calmly, is something that I've been trying to incorporate more into my teaching practices, just because when you're raising your voice, it doesn't do anything to help de-escalate the situation. And just, it's what the student probably wants is for you to raise your voice. So just really practicing being calm during any sort of negative situations.
That's pretty cool. I liked what you just said too. You said the student may want to see if they can get that kind of reaction from you.
Right.
Honestly, it feels a little bit powerful for a young person to go, oh, I got them, I got them to buy in and their button was pushed and now they're yelling or they're mad or whatever. So what Candida is saying is really important, right? It's like, if you can stay calm and you're not allowing them to control you in that way, it really helps them kind of get out of that game, right? So let me ask, can you hear me, Jennifer?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I was looking
So
for
Jennifer, which one of these do you lean on a little more in your practice?
I would say 3, but also 4. 4 is one that I think is really important, creating that space for de-escalation. So, I mean, that can be a lot of things, like creating that environment of using these other strategies, being calm, safe, being an approachable person, but also having a space where students or whoever you're meeting with really feels like they can be open, that they're not going to be overheard. So that privacy component to it, I think, helps really create that space for de-escalation, maybe pulling away from the setting where the situation was happening so that you really can get a fresh set perspective for everybody going into talking about what's going on.
That makes a lot of sense, right? And I think, people that will give people space for de-escalation, it feels like from those people's perspective, it feels like you respect them, that you accept them, that they may need a little bit of time, they may need some space, they may, and so you're creating kind of a safe opportunity for them to kind of calm down and reflect. And some people actually will utilize like a reflection sheet where they ask some restorative questions or anything like that to help people kind of focus and just de-escalate a little bit. So just think about this, like kind of think about it like, how might you be able to actually not just react to behavior, but really learn from the behavior. What's the behavior teaching us? What's behind the behavior? And then being strategic with your language so that your language that you're using, you're actually thinking about it, you're mindful about it. And then the intention should always be during conflict to be able to have that intention of reintegrating them back into the good graces in the community, right? Because that's the idea is always, how can we reintegrate them back into a good relationship with their teacher or a good relationship with another student? And it doesn't have to be like they become best friends or something. I'm just saying to reintegrate them back into that respect with each other, so they can move forward. And then when they learn these skills, you're actually teaching them life skills that will help them in their relationships in their family. And as they move on into adulthood, as they create their own families or they're in work, these are all skills that come into play for them and will actually, decide on whether they're going to be successful in those places. And one of the things that Laura and I have found out in interviewing these young people who are about 21, after they've been involved in restorative leadership in their school, and then they move on into adulthood, literally every single one of them, and I think we've interviewed maybe definitely 10 or more, they've all said that it's actually served them in their relationships in family, in work, in higher education. And so, just think about all of that. And then, so when we say, okay, community agreements during conflict, you may want to have something that you have set up where, if you're having a conversation with a student who's in conflict, you may want to kind of say, hey, can we agree to these before we start even dialoguing right now, right? Speak and listen with respect, speak one at a time, maintain confidentiality, be authentic without harmful language, right? Be present, and then stay open to others' perspectives. You may want to kind of come to some agreement with them, even when you're having a individual conversation. Are these okay with you? And you want to add something, or you feel like this is good? And then it definitely, when you bring people together, you definitely, again, want to review the community agreements before you start to have dialogue like that. So just think about it, just some tools to think about. And then what we wanted to do is ask that you think about this, because we know many of you will like, after there's conflicts, you might bring in a parent, and you're having a dialogue with a parent and a student, for example. And what I want to do is I want to kind of role play out for you something that actually did happen. And let's say you're the facilitator. You're like there with the parent and the student, and it could be somebody else, but you're definitely the one who's facilitating this kind of dialogue or circle discussion. And so, and what I'm ultimately going to ask you is, what strategies could you use during this circle dialogue to improve the communication? Because now, and I'll just give you the situation of what happened. So this young man who was there, and his mom was there, the young man had gone on to one of these field trips to the zoo. And while he was at the zoo, while he was in, they have these gift stores, he stole a small little stuffed animal, and he was caught. And it really caused some problems. and this young man happened to be on probation, and it could have caused him even more difficult problems after that. But the police were called. It was just kind of like a big scene, and it caused some delays for their bus to leave. And so all these people were impacted, but the mom was with him, and the mom was really upset. And so when we started asking questions of the mother about, like, how was she feeling about this, and what, things like this. And so she kind of started to really, I guess, kind of demean and devalue her son in front of us. And we could see the son's body language slowly just changed. In the beginning, he was like, able to look his mom in the face, look at us in the eyes, and he was talking, and he sounded, he definitely was sorry for what he did. He took responsibility. It was really quite amazing. But then as his mom continued to kind of say things like, I'm just so upset and disappointed in my son. I thought he was smart, but after these dumb, stupid things that I question, maybe he is dumb. And his stupid decisions make me think that he's not somebody I can trust. He may just be too stupid for that. So now, I know that may push some of your buttons, but what I want to do now is I want you to go, and if you were the facilitator, what kinds of strategies could you use to intervene in that kind of a dialogue, in a conversation that may be able to help that mother, help the son, help you, help who's ever in that circle with you? So what kinds of strategies could you use, right, to intervene? And so those people at the Learning Choice Academy, you're going to need to stand up again and go in. You can choose different people for your tryout, so you mix it up a little bit. And then Robert will put us into different triads as well. All right, welcome back, everybody, and thank you for engaging in that. I think a lot of learning happens in small groups. It really does. Obviously, if you're open, you got to be listening, right, and kind of be authentically sharing, and it really does enhance learning. There's a whole different dynamic when people go into small groups. So I want to encourage you even to use that as a teaching kind of like a pedagogy, right? But Brittany, would you be willing to share kind of like, what's a strategy that you could use in that situation that I put out there?
in my group, we talked a lot about, so one of the strategies that most of us in the group kind of agreed upon was separating the mom and the student, just for a number of reasons, whether it's, to help them both calm down. Because like I said, in my group, a lot of the times when we're angry or when we're really upset about things, we tend to say things that we really don't mean, just in the heat of that moment. So really taking a step back and just allowing them to separate so that they're able to calm down. And then really, leaning on another adult as means of support so that we're able to separate the two. If it's just myself working with the student and parent, I'm probably not going to be able to separate them. And it depends on, the relationships that I may have with them, but really leaning on another person, making sure I can get somebody to support so that we're able to separate them, to calm them down and to talk to them and really, figure out what's going on, what can be done to help, and understanding both sides of the story. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Brittany. That's fantastic. And Jennifer, what about you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we talked about, so strategies was using a speaker listener, reminding them that the purpose is for healing and restoration, and trying to remember what the other one that we talked about was. Like slowing things down, maybe doing some breathing, again, to help them de-escalate.
That's great. I think all those are we've had some really great suggestions so far. And so sometimes what we say in the restorative work is that if you're going to have it, like I wouldn't say that was a restorative conference, right? It's a restorative conversation though, and it's responding to some kind of a conflict. And so when you think of it, it's like you need to do the pre-work well, so that when somebody comes into the meeting, they understand kind of what the meeting is about and what your expectations are. So they, like, for example, that mother needed to know, when you come in, what we're going to ask of you is this. And it's okay for you to have some feelings about what happened and things, but we want to make sure that your language is in such a way that it's actually helping the young person, because you may have some community agreements right there in your own conversation, even between the mother and the son, about not using language that's demeaning or devaluing. You can even give examples about like what that would look like, because when you call somebody stupid, that's called a demeaning statement about them. Right? It devalues them. It dehumanizes them. When you call somebody dumb, stupid, slow, those kinds of lazy, those are very demeaning kinds of things to say about somebody. And believe me, if you've ever been in these meetings, you will see when a parent says those words, if they say it a few different times, you will see the young person, their body will go like this. It'll slowly, and they'll start to go like this. They'll literally do that. I've seen it. And so you want to do that pre-work, so that people come in understanding, and then it's okay for you to kind of like say, hey, I just need to, even if that first time somebody says something, you may want to just kind of say, excuse me, I just want to make sure, you may have it even posted up, just make sure people understand that we are following the community agreements, and you're welcome to call me on them too if I'm not following them. But I want you to know these are important because it helps us to respect each other. So it just gives the mother a chance to kind of like think about, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot she mentioned that to me, or he mentioned, just gives people a chance to reset in their language. So just think about that. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then that's our last break for this training time that we have together, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up about 50 minutes. So just facilitating dialogue through conflict. And what that means is when you're the facilitator, okay, and you're facilitating dialogue through conflict, you got to be prepared for expressions of emotions, including crying, sadness, shame, anger, etc. So you just prepare yourself so that when it happens, you're not shocked, you're not, and you're not kind of like having a reaction too much, because as a facilitator, you're going to need to kind of keep yourself somewhat calm during that time. And then model listening and responding restoratively. And usually the way you do that is you acknowledge feelings and thanking them for sharing. That's even if some of their sharing was kind of like not perfectly done or whatever, but it's like they expressed some of their angst or some of their fear or some of their anger or whatever it be, their sadness. And you just always, your response as a facilitator is, thank you for being authentic with us. We appreciate your sharing, right? And then you move on. You want to maintain that safe environment and remind them to follow the community agreements. And then so you definitely want to have those community agreements in a place where you can access them, so that you can kind of refer to them. And so you go over them in the beginning, you kind of, and even if you think, like, let's just say you're going to kind of have a dialogue with a couple of people, you're thinking, okay, I'm not going to really, this isn't going to be needed. I have learned, through failure and stuff, it's like, I've learned that you should always have them, because you can't measure beforehand how people's emotions will kind of get them. And so you really need to do that. I would say that's a must. You need to maybe even go over previously with them to make sure they understand what those agreements are. You don't want to get into an arguing thing. You don't want to try to convince somebody that, like, especially like you're right about something, or, and you definitely don't want to use shame, like shaming, if you know what that is. You don't want to kind of make people feel badly, right, in order to kind of make your point or something. So just kind of think about these things. You'll have it in the PowerPoint. And then we definitely also recommend is one thing that Robert and I were talking about during the break is that, you're just because you're a restorative practitioner doesn't mean you're a doormat, right? You're not somebody that just like everybody can just, abuse with language and all this other stuff, emotional abuse. And, no, you need to have boundaries. So when you have community agreements, you can refer to community agreements and things, but it's okay for you to tell people, hey, I feel hurt when you call me this, when you say this about like all teachers are this way, or, because, you might say, well, I'm a teacher and I feel like when you say that, you're saying that about me and it hurts. It makes me feel, sad and frustrated. And it would be helpful if you would, refrain from saying those kinds of harmful things. And don't refer to, people like that, because it feels hurtful. So it's fine for you. It's actually, it's thought of to be what we call affective communication, where you're communicating your affect to a student or to a staff, a colleague, or a loved one. That is what actually helps to what we say this right here. It sets boundaries, healthy boundaries. It provides feedback to them. It shows them the human impact of their words and their behavior. And it gives them the opportunity to grow in understanding and empathy. So it's really, important that our communication is done strategically and well, especially during conflicts. And there may be times that, you may want to say, well, you're just lazy. That's why you're not getting any of your work done. Or, okay, you might be thinking that or have an opinion about that, but that's not the right communication, because that would be considered a demeaning kind of statement. Even if you think it's true, it doesn't give you the right to make a demeaning statement. For example, instead of saying you're just being lazy, Jennifer, do you mind if I call on you one more time here and ask you, like, how might you use this kind of a formula instead of calling a student, like, saying you're just lazy? Like if you have that feeling like this kid's just lazy, they're not doing their homework, they're not engaging in the activities, they're not doing stuff like that. So, you may feel that feeling of you're just lazy, but how would you say it in a constructive way using this formula?
Well, I feel concerned when you don't engage in your schoolwork, and it would be helpful if you could ask for help or reach out and use one of the supports that we've discussed.
That's perfect, right? Because if you heard what Jennifer was doing, she's like, I feel concerned, when you don't engage in these things, right? And it would be helpful if you just ask for help or tap into some of the resources, the supports that we've provided for you. Now, some people, just so you know, they add in, they'll say something like, hey, the only reason I'm even saying this to you is because I care about you. So you may want to, you could kind of put that as your pre-statement in some ways, right? I'm just taking this time to sit with you just for this 1 minute because you're important to me. You're valuable to me. So you can, some people have used that and then they say, I feel concerned, when you're not engaging like this. And it'd be helpful if you reach out to me. I'll support you, or reach out to this other support. Again, just kind of allowing ourselves to go in that kind of negativity and just you're just lazy, that's obviously something that we don't want to do. Or even a statement such as, stop being so disruptive. I understand why we would say that, I get it, especially we're busy and we're just like, stop being so disruptive. But what would be a way, think of what that disruptive student, what kind of emotion is it causing in you? And what way could you communicate, with them? And so let me ask Brittany, would you mind? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, if you don't mind. So this would be a student that you want to just say to him, you're kind of feeling that thing of just stop being so disruptive. But what could be a kind of more constructive, restorative way to using this formula?
I feel worried when I guess I'm going to be specific.
And by the way, Brittany, I just want to kind of coach you through it. But go ahead. When you say when, you could say it's okay for you now to say when you're disrupting class or when you're,
okay.
I mean? Yeah.
Okay. Because I was going to say I feel worried when you are disturbing the class during silent reading. And it would be helpful if you can come to me and express that you need a break instead of disrupting the class.
Absolutely. So now, Brittany, that was very helpful to listen to you work through that. It was really helpful. So I feel grateful, by listening to you. But so I think it's something that we want to practice, right? So maybe you might want to take that and think about different situations. And because if you don't practice it, it's when it gets to be that situation, you may not be that effective at communicating it. But if you do it a few times, what happens is it starts to come more natural to you. And so, even honestly, even with loved ones at home, you can say something like, well, you know what, I feel frustrated when every time I say that I'm upset, you try to diminish my feelings. And it would be helpful if you just listen to me and acknowledge my feelings, right? Because that happens a lot in different homes, different families. So but it's like all it is like a formula for communicating. So because what happens is when we don't use that kind of an affective communication thing, what we can just lean more towards, well, you never listen to me, or go on the attack. You know what I mean? It's like, why are you always doing that? Or, you know, it's kind of like we allow our emotions then to guide our dialogue, rather than kind of our that restorative commitment to it.
Like a defense mechanism.
Yes, absolutely. And we don't want to, you know, let ourselves become too defensive, because then once that happens, once we become defensive, now we are in a place where we're caught in our own emotions. And a lot of times our cognitive brain cannot work that well. And by the way, that's why sometimes you hear people, like, you ever have people that you're dealing with, and they just start like cussing and saying all these words that seem to be so like a base kind of language, and it's because they've allowed themselves to kind of like get out of that sort of cognitive thinking down into their emotional thinking and then what happens is, when they're in that emotional kind of part of their brain, it's really not a part where your language is enhanced, right? Your language is really diminished in some ways. And all you're focused on is I feel defensive, I have to defend myself. And yeah, you go into that fight or flight type of thing. So when conflict or harm occurs, are we asking these right questions? And these aren't the right questions, but are we asking the right questions, or are we asking who did it? What rules have been broken and what punishment should be given? Because that's what's been asked for decades in schools. And so what ends up happening is we focus on, okay, who was guilty? Let's give them the punishment. What's the rule? We'll tell them the rule that was broken, and bam, we document it, and then they're out. That's not the restorative way of saying. We want to focus on the relationships in the community, and what was done, who was harmed, what were people thinking, because we're trying to raise consciousness rather than just punish and hope they learn a lesson. That's not really a good educational strategy, just kind of hope they learn their lesson. Robert, would you be willing to read these restorative, like where it says restorative questions?
Definitely. Restorative questions, designed to be open-ended and non-judgmental, to help people reflect and express their role in harmful situations. Provide people with the opportunity to educate us about what they are thinking, rather than us making assumptions. Restorative questions provide the first step towards healing. To provide a safe environment, and provide a safe environment where people trust that they will be heard and accepted as they are.
All right, cool. Thank you. So really, yeah, Robert, it's like kind of like asking these restorative questions really provides that kind of, first step, rather than us kind of, saying to people like we know everything already, so I'm not going to ask you anything. It's more like, no, yes, we're going to ask you questions so that we can begin to help you to really raise your consciousness, right? Begin to think, to really give them an opportunity to really think about what was happening, rather than us just making those assumptions. And then these are what we call combined restorative questions. In our introduction to restorative practices, we had questions that were like for the person who was harmed, and questions for the person who did the harm, right? They were separate questions. But there's a way that you can combine them like this, right? So from your point of view, what happened? And what were you thinking and feeling at the time? How have you and others been affected? What are you feeling now? and what would make the situation as right as possible. So what we're saying is these questions can be asked to either the person who was harmed or the person who did the harm. And it can be a way, some people have actually developed sort of reflection sheets off of questions like these, and they've asked young people as they're kind of, needing some time, they ask them to write out their answers to these questions. And then when they meet with them, might be a little bit later, they meet with them. Now the students have had time to think about some of these things. Because in the moment, if it's too close to the time, a lot of times they haven't had time to reflect. They won't be able to answer you that well. So you want to kind of give time for some de-escalation and time to think and reflect and maybe even write out their answers. And it can be helpful for them if they're meeting with you and then they've got something to kind of refer to. So just think about, these are just tools that might be helpful to you. But what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask you to go through an activity, and this is going to be a pair. One of you who was willing to, you can even think back to when you were in whatever grades that you are serving. Like if you serve middle school, okay, well, when you're in 8th grade, maybe there was a conflict and you can remember that. Allow the person who was with you, you're gonna have to decide when you come together as a pair, hey, I do have a conflict, right? And then the other person will then ask you the questions. The idea is we want people to get like a little bit of practice asking these questions. So we really appreciate people volunteering. It doesn't have to be a big conflict or anything. We want people to get the practice of asking the questions, but we want you to know what it feels like to reflect on these questions and then to respond. So it's gonna be a back and forth. The person asking the questions, when you're done answering that first one, they're gonna ask you the second one. And when you're done, they're gonna ask you the third and the fourth and the fifth until you're done with that. And then we're gonna see how it felt for both the person asking the questions and the person that was asked the questions. So Robert, if you can help us by getting us to go into pairs, and then if you're in the Learning Choice Academy, please find somebody, and maybe you can, I don't know if you can put it up on your screens to be able to see these questions so you can refer to those, please. And Vanessa, would you be willing, because I know you shared your situation with your daughter and everything, but just what was it like for you to be asked the questions and to go through that with Laura?
It was interesting. I kind of took my daughter's perspective and then kind of my perspective as a parent, and it was nice to see it both ways, kind of. And then she was very helpful and reflecting and listening and kind of, very helpful.
Well, that's great. That's the idea. I know Laura quite well, and I know she would be helpful anyway, but I think that she was right that those questions guide you to build it's kind of like a little bit of a therapeutic process.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. And Tamara, what about you? What was your experience like?
I agree. Those questions were awesome because I have the old restorative card here.
Yes.
And I was just looking at how you combined them, and I love that. It's so much easier than I could remember maybe 5. I couldn't remember 8 or 9 things. So it's awesome. And I really did think that it led us through, just a cycle of trying to figure out how to heal and what would make things right. And so that's nice just to kind of ponder those things.
And I really appreciate I appreciate your feedback on that, Tamara, because the restorative cards that have the questions, like I was explaining, that one, and now the combined one, and you're like, hey, I like these combined ones. And it's so cool to be able to hear from you and others. I hope that you have that experience as well. And some of you who were in the in the Learning Choice Academy, big rooms. Would you mind just kind of letting us know what a few of you, if you don't mind, just in the chat, what was your experience like, either asking the questions or getting the questions asked of you? Did it take you through a kind of a bit of a nice process? Did it feel like it flowed for you? Or if you don't mind in the chat, to be able to communicate that way so we can kind of see what your experience was like, even just a couple of sentences on that. Good. So thank you, Julie. So it really made me reflect on what could be done to remedy the situation. Good. One thing that we've realized is that many people go through kind of harmful situations, and then they need just a bit of a guide to go through a process, right? And most times people want to just be heard. But just like Kayla says, it was nice to have a sympathetic ear. Honestly, that's mostly what we need to feel like, hey, wow, somebody actually hears me, And Joe says it helped reinforce the idea of listening without offering advice. Again, thank you, Joe. That's mostly what people want. They just want people to listen to them. And it feels so good when they don't have somebody reacting or responding and telling them what they should do, just doing that. So, and Mary says, Miles says at first trying to pick his brain for something to share, and then realized he had something to get off his chest, and his partner was a great listener. There you go. Right. And so, right now we're adults doing this with each other. And at some point, we think we want to kind of teach students to begin to do this with each other, just to kind of learn, like, don't be afraid of the lesson, don't be afraid of the questions, and start with really small kinds of problems, and where students can go, where they can experience what you're writing and you've been expressing to us is, it was kind of therapeutic. And by the way, therapeutic basically means it was healing, right? That's what it means. And so, and if you read what Eva says, this activity helped reinforce the idea of perspective taking, and that looking at the perspectives of the people around you is vital. Wow, that's well said, Eva. Thank you. So you see how like something so simple can be so helpful. So we really appreciate you all, just everything, just how you keep engaging. You're what makes this training to be experiential and to be able to learn in an experiential way. Sometimes the conflicts are generational, right? And so just like oppression is generational sometimes and things. So and when people are living in that constant kind of conflict, it really does impair them in some ways, right? Like it impairs their ability to trust, which of course, why would they trust if their community or their families or their generations of families have felt so demeaned and devalued from a system like education or law enforcement or employment or housing or health, or you know what I mean? I can understand. I mean, hey, people are like, hey, why would I trust you? You have to now gain my trust. And that's part of what us as restorative practitioners, at least within education, we're trying to heal some of the harm that has been done. And that's a lot of work, because it's deep inside of people, that conflict and the feeling of oppression. So we know this takes a long time, because relationships take a long time. So what we want to do is we want to kind of have like a little bit of a closing circle. And again, in the chat, if you would just maybe one takeaway from today, just something that you may have learned in your discussions with your colleagues, or something you read or something that was shared with you, a slide or a thought, just something that resonated with you. If you would, you could just, if you don't mind, just putting that in the chat as part of our closing circle as we close our time together today. And one of my takeaways is it's amazing how we can find a way to come together like this, even in this virtual format. And I know, the Learning Choice Academy had said, hey, we got these, there's going to be a few different groups together. And I was wondering, how is this going to work? I mean, because it's just, I was thinking logistically and technically, but thank God for Robert Ruiz. And that he can help us and guide us and support us and help me think through these things. But here we came together, and what a great thing that you all were willing to engage with each other. That's what made, I think, this training experience really great. I love that too. Healing often should be a collective process. Wow, that's cool, Daphne. Thank you. And practice active listening. You don't need to problem solve. Way to go. Effective communication and active listening are crucial. How best to use the restorative questions in actual situations. Being a good listener is essential. Thank you so much. Practicing affective communication will create effective understanding. Very good. I learned that perspective taking can make all the difference in the world in every situation. I also learned the importance of discussing issues when they arise instead of not taking things through. Very good. Really enjoyed the ability to put into practice the ideas that we learned right away. I really love seeing that and love doing it as well. Thank you. And then meeting, discovering, process, and bettering ourselves. Thank you. Trust and awareness of communication. RP collaboration on the first day of onboarding staff builds relationships. Wow, that's cool. Love that, Mary. Thank you. She's right. That restorative practices collaboration on the first day actually builds relationships among us, among staff, among colleagues. And we should do this first, us, and then we can share that with our students. We can even model it with our students. Having agreements present in the space to help redirect when needed. So these are great, great comments. And then trust and respect are the foundations for a healthy practice. Without the roots, the leaves will wilt. Wow, excellent. I should have known that wisdom would come from Laura. We love you, Laura. Thank you for your help. And she's always so supportive in everything we do. And yeah, she's just amazing. So she's a great resource. If you ever want to get in contact or just send her a direct message. And Laura, I don't know if you would be willing to share your email just in case, because she's a very experienced restorative practitioner, has great insight. And then here we have helpful insight with regard to best practices for effective communication and conflict resolution. Excellent. And thank you, Laura, for sharing that. We work really well with her and we appreciate her. And we'll be sending you the follow-up stuff. And then for those of you who are going to join us tomorrow, we look forward to seeing you. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we hope the best for your, for a great school year. And we hope that you'll continue to practice some of these things that we practice today. And yeah, just thank you for your service to our kids and our families. We love you.